welcome back to everyone to another episode of Feather and Fur. Your host, Brad Hurlbus. Today we have on Emily and Josh from Crappie Junction. Welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. I think it's going to be fun. Touch base on a little bit of everything outdoors from some fellow Wisconsinites.
Absolutely.
You know, we can think of summer and fall as we're both dealing with, you're dealing with a snowstorm and I'm dealing with freezing rain and sleet. It's a great way to remember what Wisconsin is when it's nice outside.
Well, fortunately, we're almost into maple season, so that's our saving grace. We're just waiting for that, and we got a few more ice trips up our sleeve as well.
That's what I was going to say is we still have decent ice. And so I only wanted a little bit of snow for the snowmobile. This is more than I asked for, but we're going to make the end of the season work out.
What are you supposed to get up there? Because the totals have changed so drastically. In this episode, we're recording it. So for everyone that I normally don't say when we're recording, we're in the middle of a snowstorm. This airs in 2 days. Like, you can catch up.
Yeah, I think the last time when we checked was about 10 to 12 inches. So we'll see. It's supposed to be cold though, so that's the powder snow is usually pretty nice.
Sure.
Well, and ultimately the people at home will know more details than we do at this point. Because,
Yeah.
like you said, by this point, this will be airing.
Did they get 12 inches? Did they get 27? We'll find out. We'll know on Saturday. Because that was the crazy thing with this storm. Like, 2 days ago, they're like, well, Madison might get 10 to 12 inches or 1 to 2 inches of slush and a quarter inch of ice. And we're kind of leaning towards that line right now, but not quite a quarter inch of ice. But then just north of me, well, 12 to 24, we don't know.
Yep.
24, that's a big range. Like
that's a lot of range. Make sure you're right, though.
It does make sure you're right. I mean, you throw enough darts at the dartboard, eventually you're going to hit a bullseye, right?
Right.
So I'm curious. And normally I start my shows off with asking you how you got in the outdoors, but I'm going to skip that because I want to know about maple season. And I wasn't planning on the episode going this way. I was really planning on, but I have not actually had an opportunity to talk to people about like the full, because I know there is some serious passion there with tapping trees and boiling. Like, I know the process overview, like, because I have some friends that have done it, but I'd love to really hear more about that because I know that's a huge tradition in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, it ranges anywhere from, mid-February all the way to the end of March, sometimes even into April, depending on the weather. I didn't grow up doing it. I kind of learned it over the last decade, and I've kind of fallen in love with it. Wisconsin has some great traditions. I love sturgeon. I love the maple season. I'm a prairie boy by heart, so I grew up with lots of ducks and lots of upland game and stuff. And then I moved over here, and it's, now we live in the hardwoods. So it's been a transition, but it's super awesome. We don't, do any production. It's just for ourselves and friends and family. More or less just to have it on hand.
No,
yeah.
Go ahead.
We're really excited because, like Josh was saying, it is our first year doing it on our own. So, there's a lot that we were able to learn from others because it kind of takes a community to do this sometimes, but it is really cool to be able to put all the pieces together and I guess go into our first season strong.
That's awesome. And if you haven't had real maple syrup, it's not like what you buy at the grocery store. Even the real maple syrup in a grocery store isn't the same as like buying it from someone that's actually tapping trees and it's different. Like, there's bars and like there's supper clubs in the North Woods of Wisconsin that actually have real maple syrup, and there's always an upcharge for it, which is 100% understandable. But if you don't pay it, you're completely missing out.
Yeah, and it really depends on the maker too. I have at my work, I have some of the older guys that still tap. They tapped with their grandma. They'd use a cast iron kettle, and it has like kind of an irony taste. And then we have like, I have friends that do the straight stainless steel, like evaporator thing. Like, so it ranges a lot and the taste can range a lot. And it's just something that I really enjoy, like not only just consuming, but like cooking with and using it for other stuff like that.
It's a pretty amazing base for an old fashioned. I mean, if you
Yeah.
don't use maple syrup in your old fashioned, you're missing out. how
It is
Wisconsin can we get in this episode, right?
Right?
It is quite the process, though, to make it, So I don't know if there's people out there who don't know, but I mean, it involves collecting a massive amount of sap from the trees. So, sometimes you drive around and you see people have like little bags hanging off and everything. And, what is the ratio? It takes like 40 gallons of sap sometimes to make syrup. And that varies year by year. But to collect all that and evaporate it down, I mean, it sounds so easy to like boil water and make syrup, but it is really so much more than that.
Yeah.
I actually want to hear more. Like I like my episode, like I'm not like my episode is like outdoors, right? It's not just strictly hunting. It's archery, and we were going to talk about archery. Well, I'm sure we'll get into it, but like I really like am interested in like different things you can do in the outdoors, right? So I'm curious on that process. I like, will you dig into it a little bit? Why? How do you know when the tree's ready? It's like why does it produce sap in like end of winter, spring? Like what's unique right now? And then as you collect sap, like how do you process it? Like I really want to learn here. I'm really curious.
Yeah, so I mean, you play it by ear a lot of times. You can, if you keep a really good eye on your trees, you can start to see some of the buds, leaking. But a lot of times it's just pay attention to the weather, and when it gets up to, 35 degrees during the day and then freezes at night, that action really wakes up the roots and it starts drawing up the sap. And then when it starts to freeze, it'll push the sap back down, and that cycle is really what you want to hit. In some years, you can have 8-12 weeks of that, and some years you can have 1 week. And so it just is kind of one of those natural phenomenons that all plants do, and it just happens that maple trees produce kind of some of the tastiest. But you can do hickory trees, you can do birch trees, you can pretty much any hardwood that you want. They just have different ratios of sap to syrup, and yeah.
Well, and even, maple trees from year to year will have some variation in that sugar content. And so you never quite know what kind of year it's going to be until you're, finishing off that syrup. And actually a crazy thing, well, I think it's crazy. We lived in town. I'm in a small town in Wisconsin. If you're familiar, we were in Clintonville. But there were big enough maple trees between like us and our friends and a few other little places. But we tapped a bunch of the trees in town, and we were able to make syrup even just from in-town trees for us and our friends. And so that was a really unique experience for me.
Interesting. I didn't know you could do that. I didn't think there'd be enough trees to get that much sap. So how much on average, what do you think a tree produces for sap? I know it depends on the length of the season, but let's say in 24 hours in a good push-pull cycle, like how much sap are you getting out of average maple tree?
You can get 4 to 8 gallons. It really depends on how often you empty it, because a lot of times, life gets in the way and you have to go to work, and then you come home and you try and get it done, or you take some time off and you just do that for your job for a little bit, and you just dump out the buckets or dump out the bags. A lot of people will have big storage containers. Myself, we're planning just to boil it as we take it off the trees, so we're probably not going to put out a big amount of taps this year anyway. We're just going to see how the trees go, and yeah, I mean, you can get quite a bit in a day.
Well, and the other thing, you're talking about the bags or the barrels and however people are collecting it. But I mean, if you're ever driving around Wisconsin, sometimes you'll even see people with like tubing running all through the trees. And you're like, what is going on there? And a lot of people will leave that up all year. Some people take it down and put it back up and everything, but they are connecting all those different taps through a tube system. And so instead of collecting those bags and everything, it kind of shoots it all the way down to wherever their sugar shack is. And that's a really unique thing, I guess. It takes a lot of work to do that. It's not for everybody, but that's the cool thing is you tap as much as you want, you do as much as you want to kind of fit yourself. And I mean, it's a short-term hobby, so that's kind of nice. You don't have to invest all year long, but during that time, it takes the time.
And it really, you really have the opportunity to get as fancy or as low key as you want. A lot of times just a wood stove and like an outdoor wood stove, like a camping stove and some steamer pans. You can do it just in there. Or, like we went and bought an evaporator from a guy, and he a lot of these things are handmade. And that has like a 2x4 pan on it. And And so like we'll fill up the pan, and when you get to be about an inch of water, that's kind of where you want to keep it. And that's where you'll boil it off, and you'll get to a certain point. You'll see a certain color. There's something called a hygrometer, and that measures the sugar in the liquid. And so once you get all 100% sugar, you want to take it off, and then you're going to want to finish it either on gas or something outside. Like I like using a turkey fryer just because you don't want to do any of this inside of your house. It'll make it produce the steam that comes off has different types of sugars, and it'll make your whole house sticky.
I hate to be the person that figured that out, right? Like you're walking around like, ugh,
right?
like, ugh.
Yeah.
But that's kind of why we're talking about, it takes kind of a team of people, because, you can do this by yourself. I'm sure there's somebody out there who is, but, it takes, in some cases, these big evaporator pans or turkey roasters. If you're going to do it solely that way, it takes a lot of time. But, these different steps in the process, start to complete, it is, gosh, and because everything is so messy and so sticky, like you do almost want to do a lot at once, make it worth it.
Well, tree sap's just sticky to begin with, and I'm sure like at least you're probably making it slightly less sticky, I would assume, by adding the water and boiling it down, but I don't know. That's an assumption because I feel like tree sap is way worse than maple syrup when it comes to stickiness.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing where you turn this clear liquid, and sometimes you'll get what we call ratios, right? So you'll get some trees that are pumping out sap water that's like 28 to 1. So that means 28 gallons of sap to 1 gallon of syrup. While average for a sugar maple is about 40 to 1. So like when you get those high sugar content trees, it changes from year to year. Some trees are just in a good spot, or they just do really well, but you can taste the sugar just in the sap. In some cases it just tastes like water. And so, it's fun to watch it boil down, and it gets into this like kind of really light yellow color, and then it starts to caramelize, and then you start checking it. And once you get to that point that is almost syrup, but it still has, maybe 20% or 25% water left, then you want to take it off and finish it on gas, because you can control that a lot better, and you're simmering it, and you just want to bring it down to like, I think it's like 16% or 14%. And that's where you get the syrup, where it pours like syrup. It has that color. I know recently Vermont changed a lot of the grading system on how it's done. So like just like having a really light colored syrup or a really dark one, a lot of times doesn't matter. It just comes down to preference, or how you cook it, or like how much different minerals and stuff are in the water. It's just a really cool process, and it's fun because a lot of Wisconsinites do it as a family, and so like it's a big family outing. Uncles and grandpas and aunts and kids, like they all take their turns, and you sit around the fire and you boil sap, and people rotate. You keep the fire going 24 hours, or you stoke it up and go to bed and wake up in the morning and do that for a couple weeks. It's just a fun time.
And Wisconsin is rich with traditions. That's one thing I focus on in my show. Traditions, because traditions are more about the experience rather than a kill or something along those lines, or limits. You're really looking at the experience there, and that's just another way to keep people involved in the outdoors.
Yeah, and not that time of year too, you can run into a lot of really cool stuff in the woods. You can start seeing some of the critter signs changing into the spring pattern. You can start seeing some of the spring ephemerals, or that those first plants in spring. All that stuff you start to recognize year after year. And you're like, oh, well, I'm walking through my yard and I see this popping up. I should probably get my tap stuff ready, or something like that. So it's just really cool to be in touch with the outdoors from a really different perspective than just hunting and fishing.
Well, and this year is actually kind of, I think unique. I guess every year is unique in its own way. But, some of the maple tappers have already started talking about doing that. There's places where people put taps in. And sometimes when that weather fluctuates, they might have a little bit more of a season to come because, it is so early. But it is kind of a cool thing, the weather this year too, because now we got all this snow. So maybe that kind of slowed things down for the maple season. But when you're collecting all this sap and everything, one of the things you have to remember to do, everyone's so ready to give up on winter, but if you can save some of that snow, like get a bucket of it and put it in the side of your garage where it like doesn't get, it's in the shadow, you know, it doesn't melt as much. And because you're going to want that snow to pack around if you have extra of the maple, the sap, if you're going to store it before, like if your pan is full, what you're boiling on already. So that snow can be really helpful. But like you were talking about family, get kids to do that. They love to pile up snow, you know, but just some fun things to remember as you're switching seasons.
It's just a great way to get it gives you excitement, right? For that's just another way to be excited for spring. I know a lot of guys love turkey hunting and things like that, but this is before that even. Like this is like we're getting into that like end of February, beginning of March. I mean, you're not really into turkey season yet. You're coming like, I mean, up north by you still got strong ice fishing. This year for us, not so much down here anymore. Our ice is it's probably still fishable in some areas. I would probably just get the boat out and hit the river for walleyes at this point because it's wide open. Like
Yeah. And that's, you know, that goes back to, you know, turkey season is right around the corner, and you know, I personally don't really turkey hunt that much, but I really do love calling. And we do have, you know, we just purchased a new house in August, and so both of us are still learning a lot about, you know, how the annual cycle of things around the yard goes. And it might just be fun just to go out there and sit with a slate and some camo and see, you know, we've seen them roosting in the fall. We haven't seen them, but you know, that's
right through the yard.
when you're tapping trees, you might be able to find that trail or find that roost tree and just be able to mark it for a month from now, you know?
Sure. Absolutely. Another fun thing walking around is like, got to keep your eyes out for sheds. I mean, you're right in that time of the year too. I mean, to shed hunt, it's just a great way to like bring more things into the outdoors. I want to, before we move on, like, I guess I didn't know Vermont did the grading scale, but like, what is the grading scale? Like, is it color? Is it sweetness? Is it taste, consistency? Like, what are they grading maple syrup on? And are we talking like, is it grade A, B? Is it numbers? I'm curious. Like,
yeah, so that scale has a lot to do with taste and color. It's you know, it's a standard for the industry. Vermont, you know, has a whole university dedicated to maple syrup. And so they do a whole lot, and you know, it sounds silly, but they do a whole lot of tree research and climate change research and a lot of stuff that impacts that industry, because it is a lucrative industry for big producers, right? So a lot of us heard about Canada having a maple syrup shortage, and it's like, well, it's kind of funny when you say it out loud, but then all of a sudden you're like, wait, well, that sucks. Like, that goes in, not only is it just for pancakes, but it goes, you know, there's sugar, you know, that there's all kinds of candy and all kinds of stuff that a lot of those people miss out on. You know, it's kind of like not having snow here for our snowmobile, for our bars and stuff up north. You know, when they don't have snow, it sounds funny, but bars don't get any business. So if you're having a shortage of maple syrup, you know, people get angry. And so that grading system, I don't know personally, because I don't take it that serious. You know, I just try and get it as close to the percents. You know, there's a lot of information online, but if you look up Vermont maple syrup grading, like, they have a whole webpage devoted to just like explaining how they do it. And there's like AA, and there's AB and AC or CB, or, you know, they really kind of they brought it from just like a very simple scale to something that, like, you know, includes the taste and the color and the texture. And so it's kind of fun, you know, to read about. Personally, that's too much. I got fishing and bees and
well, that's what I was going to say, is not to jump topics again, but, you know, as the spring comes up, that is the other thing that we think about. You know, we're talking about our different hobbies, and beekeeping is one of them. And so we're talking about the grading of the syrup, and it's a lot like grading of honey, you know, and that's kind of a trendy thing right now, bees, beekeeping, and honey. And so a lot of people have been to like honey tastings, or like at a fair, you try in a little spoon. And, that's very reminiscent of the syrup, because although they do have all the grading systems and everything, like, especially for people who do it in their home, like what it comes down to is preference. And so it's like people out there, like, I only eat crappies, I only eat bluegills, or only from this season, whatever. And it's like, that's cool. But for us, we like maple syrup like this, and so it's just cool to be able to choose that.
Well, and talk about an industry that's very tradition rich in Wisconsin. Our state insect is the honeybee. The whole central part of the state is like the mecca of beekeeping. There's a world conference in Wausau every couple of years, if not every year, where people from all over the world come and talk about honeybees, new techniques. And we've been doing it for quite a while now, just before the fad started. And there's a whole bunch to talk about. Like, we could do 4 shows on this beekeeping, but it's one of those things that we do. It's a passive hobby. It's really difficult. First off, I don't want to make it seem like you can just go like set up, because there's some depending on the way that you structure your hives and stuff, some of those boxes can weigh 100, 120 pounds. And so you have to be ready to have to move that stuff around there. For us this year, a new challenge is bears. We know we have bears in the area, so we have to pick a spot, level it out, put some electric fence around it. Normally they're not too much of a nuisance if you have an electric fence up. But if you don't,
my uncle did bees for many, many years. What did he? I don't remember what he taught at the university, but I know he taught at the university, and his father was in agriculture. He was an agriculture teacher as well. And I know he, even down not far from Madison, he has had bear issues with his bees.
Yes. Yeah. So one of our favorite people is Kent from Wapaka. They have the Dancing Bear Apiary. They have an awesome shop downtown Main Street. Yeah. And they just redid it. He has all kinds of different honey. And that guy, like him and some of the other people from that Wapaka chapter of beekeepers, they actually go down to South America and teach people how to keep bees down there.
Nicaragua.
Yep. And so like he's a wealth of knowledge, and it's fun to go and hang out at his shop and
taste the honey. We were talking about.
Yeah. But yeah, it's another passive hobby where we can have it here, we can check on it, we do the work, but then for the most part, it does for a lot of the season, it does itself. But in the spring and the fall, when traditionally you have a lot of transition, we like to fill our time with stuff so ice build up or ice out doesn't seem so long. We like to have those transition activities.
Sure, and that makes sense. You got your ice out period where you can't get out there in open water yet. Ice isn't safe. It's all honeycombed and whatnot. You're working on your maple syrup
season.
Yep.
Right, that's syrup season. And then you got honey season there. I see it. I see the correlation there. I really do. But I guess I never you're talking about like honey tastings, and I'm sure there's syrup tastings. Like I never even thought about that. And then like the judging of it, now I'm like, is this like whiskey and wine? Like I never even put like that together. Like I'm sure there's people out, like you probably have to go through like so many tastings to get certified as a judge, and like it's a whole industry I never even thought of.
Yeah, it's we haven't delved much into that. That's way above our pay grade, but no, it's fun to keep track of and just watch and just keep up with it.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Wasn't expecting the first half of the show to go there. I like it.
Yeah.
But I know we talked
about. You never know with us.
That's great though. You never know with my show. I mean, it could be anything on this show. Sometimes it's everything in the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
I know that we led to this a little bit, and I know I wanted to touch base on this. I know you guys shoot a little bit of archery, not a ton, but I know I've never shot league, so I'm kind of just curious on your opinion of like, I know that's another probably winter activity. I'm assuming that's a wintertime activity you kind of use to keep your time busy. So I'm just kind of curious, like what led you to that? Like,
so that was based, it was a bar league, and our friends are currently in the league.
Like way sooner in the story than this.
Okay, sure. Start it off.
Okay. So I mean, I don't mean to interrupt, but it's like, I think The thing about it is you kind of grew up in the outdoors and hunting, and you had mentors, and as you grew up into an adult,
I
maybe
mean,
not, am I assuming?
yeah, you're assuming. Kind of. I mean, I spent a lot of my youth fishing. I got into college in Northwest Minnesota. I did a lot of waterfowl hunting, some upland game bird. I really didn't hit the bow scene until like my junior year in college. And, I fell in love with, I've always loved, bows. I'm kind of, I don't participate in a whole lot, but I'm kind of like the Dungeons and Dragons geek, so, the archery and stuff kind of lends itself to that. And I got into it and I started doing a little bit of hunting, just teaching myself, asking questions. And then I kind of fell away from it because I just started bouncing around the country and doing different jobs. And then once we kind of settled in Wisconsin, we kind of got back into it.
Well, and that's the other end of the story, is that I grew up in Chicago. And so, when I was very young, we were closer to the city. And then after, we were kind of more in the suburbs. But, convincing one of my friends even to go on a hike, much less go hunting, was just simply out of the question. Actually, I'll even admit this, we grew up, we didn't have like public land and stuff like that. We have forest preserves down there. And my experience with wildlife was like the deer, and you'd put the quarter in the gumball machine and you get the feed, and then they eat it out of your hand. So when I moved to Wisconsin in college and met people who were hunting and outdoorsy and all of that kind of stuff, it kind of blew me away. And I loved it, but it was a lot at once, I suppose.
Culture shock. Just culture shock. It's like a different country at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we met, and you were outdoorsy and I wanted to be, fishing kind of became our first thing. But then as we were seeking out those other hobbies, archery became it. And it's kind of a funny story because one day it was coming up to hunting season. Josh didn't know if he needed new strings on his bow. And we stopped at the archery shop. And do you remember this story? He ended up not needing strings. They were in great shape. They were like, you're good for at least another season. We left there with a bow for me. Like, he asked me, he's like, are you interested? Do you want to shoot? And I just like said, yes. So,
yes,
I do. We're talking about, people getting interested and like trying these new things. And I mean, I think there are people these days, and I hate to say the C word, but COVID, everyone is so locked up, and now people are able to get out and do things again. But I think because everything feels so new, people are more willing to try new. And so obviously, I mean, this was before COVID that this all happened for me. And I guess I just decided to try it. But, lo and behold, it was that day that I took my very first shots at a target. And, growing up in a city, hunting is like a little bit hard for me. I would have to really ease into that. But shooting at a target was super fun, and ultimately something that I was half decent at, which was a really fun surprise. Like, I had no idea.
I didn't realize we had bar leagues in Wisconsin. I'm not surprised that we do. We have bar leagues for everything from darts to pool to foosball to like literally everything. Bags, tournament, like everything. There's a league for everything. Softball, volleyball. I did not realize we had archery bar leagues. That's impressive.
Well, and it might be something that's unique to the shop we were at. Butch's Archery, just south of Shawano. They have a full bar in their archery shop, and that's kind of the place we were shooting.
People are super respectful, because you think of like bows and arrows and drunk people and like, how does that all go? But people are very respectful, and I
you don't really have a whole lot of time to slam drinks when you're shooting, because you have three or four rounds and you have to shoot 20 arrows a piece, and there's 16 teams or 16 shooters, and so like it can take you show up and have something start at 7 and it might be 9:30, 10 o'clock before you're done.
Sure, and you're up there shooting quite a bit at that point. I mean, I'm sure there's some downtime as people cycle through, but it's not like you go up there, you shoot around, and then you wait around for 2 hours to see the results.
Right.
Well, and that's almost the funny thing, because every night people have things going on in their lives, and usually you put that night aside. That's what that's for, is shooting. But then there's always somebody who's like, I got to get home for whatever's going on. And so, you all have to really cycle through. You don't just like shoot at your leisure. There's lanes, you walk down together, you walk back together, you're not just doing that. Yeah. And so, I mean, even though some people do kind of want to stand around and lollygag and whatever, there's always somebody there that's like keeping everyone on track, and that's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
They got to go get their kid from basketball practice. So it's like, let's go. Yeah. Come on. Let's go. I got my kid to pick up. Let's move. And I understand exactly what you're saying, like with the respectfulness, just because there's a bar there doesn't mean there's people standing around getting drunk and shooting each other. I mean, you go to most sportsmen's clubs in Wisconsin for clay league, sporting clay, trap, 5-stand, almost every place has a bar. Almost every single sportsman's club has a bar, and everyone there is very respectful for that. Most people don't like. I've shot more rounds of clays than I can count, and we never drank beforehand. I mean, we'd go shoot a round of sporting clays or two back when I used to shoot league for sporting clays. Afterwards, we'd have a couple beers, sure. But we never do it before we'd go shoot. I probably should have. Like, I probably would have had better scores. It's like darts, you need just enough aiming fluid. But we were always respectful of the firearms, and we never did.
Yeah. And so, with the archery, we didn't, she says we walked in and got a brand new bow for her, and that's true, but you don't have to go in and spend $1,500 on a brand new bow for somebody that's new. We went in, we bought a Diamond Youth bow. It was bright green. We still have it. It's a great bow fishing bow because you can turn it way down. And she, she shot with it, and what took a little bit of time was her being able to recognize like your feet per second increases your accuracy. So even though it's an easy bow to draw back and it's a very forgiving bow, you're lobbing arrows down 20 yards instead of shooting arrows down 20 yards. And so we did end up going and getting her a Vixen. I shoot like the Hoyt Defiant, the Carbon Defiant. And I was really in love with my 2019 Rock by Diamond, and it got stolen out of my pickup. So that was why I had to buy a new bow. But it was good. Like I
think it was locked.
Yeah.
It like broke in to take it.
But I mean, it is what it is. It wasn't worth a whole lot. It was just something that I was comfortable shooting, but I switched over to the Defiant. Maybe some of your viewers know, like, that's a very long bow, axle to axle. We actually just got some cases from Lakewood that are 43 inches, and this like maxes that out. I think it's like 39 and a half or something axle to axle. And so it's like a pretty long bow. But for me, like, especially having a short draw length, I'm shooting 26 inches, having that really long axle to axle gives me a lot of forgiveness when I'm hunting. I can be off just a little bit. I practice a lot in the yard with the season coming up. We do some leagues during the winter, so it's not like I'm totally cold, but I just getting out and using it. And if you want to get into archery like that, I think that Diamond Youth bow was like $150 or $200 with a sight and a whisker biscuit on it.
You don't need anything more than that. I mean, I still have my first bow, which is a super old Bear Legion 2, like really old. I still have it. And then from there, I went to, I don't remember what it was. It was another Bear, but it was a ready to hunt. I got it on sale, I think, at Gander for $325.
Nice.
And it had a True Glow sight, whisker biscuit. Took it to a local bow shop and had them go through it. And we got the peep sight set up and everything right. So I shot it great. The only reason I got rid of it is because I became super focused on upland bird hunting, and I completely threw archery to the side.
Yeah. And that's kind of the different story for me. I came from hunting the Dakotas, western side of Minnesota. There's grouse and pheasants and ducks galore out there, and then I come here and it's like a good day on the pond is like a half a dozen mallards or 12 wood ducks, and it's like,
sure.
It's really difficult. Like I'll be the first to admit I was like super spoiled living in anybody that lives in the Dakotas and waterfowl and upland game hunts. They're super spoiled. You don't know what you have until you're missing it. But, but that's kind of where I transitioned from shotguns into archery and started focusing more on bow hunting. And luckily I work in natural resources, and all the guys in my office are all archery hunters. So, we can break down maps. We can look, we'll have people over to our properties and we'll look at stand locations and be able to collaborate during the day when we're working or whatever. And it's just very helpful and good way to learn from people that have been doing it their whole life.
Sure. I mean, not everybody can look at a map or like a topo map or any map and figure out like exactly what they're looking at, what would be a choke point, what's different funnel areas. I'm not great at that. I'm not a big archery and deer hunter though either. You were spoiled out there for your upland birds. My father-in-law has 40 acres, which the past 2 years I have had my deer within the first 15 minutes.
Nice.
Like
Nice.
I'm a big I'm not a big archery hunter because I don't like to sit. Like
Mhm.
I don't like sitting in a tree stand. I don't like for me that's too slow. I can't get out of my own head and I wind up reverting back to like what I have to do at work and planning work stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas like where I'm fishing or I'm upland hunting or duck hunting, which I do most like things that involve my dog, I'm able to truly focus on the moment, focus on the dog, and literally wash all that stuff out of my brain. And that's why I go out to do this because I want the break from real life. I want to be 100% immersed in the activity I'm currently in. And I just can't find that in archery. I can't get out of my own way when sitting in a tree stand.
Well, maybe that's why leagues is like perfect for you. You know, it keeps that pace going. You're always shooting at something. Or there's some really fun 3D shoots out there. I mean, some places just like put a deer out there and say go for it. You know, but some of these places have really elaborate setups, sound systems, ambiance, it's all set up, and explore some of those places because there's some cool stuff going on.
Oh, I've seen some amazing 3D. Like I know like there's a local bow shop, Buck Rub. They've got a really nice indoor 3D and they got a really cool 3D like walk through the woods area. And like that was always fun. It's just finding the passion, like because I don't hunt. Like I hunt, like I hunt. That's like my main passion, right? But I don't archery hunt. And for me, it's like, do I want to drive 40 minutes to go shoot, or would I rather drive 10 minutes to the local park and work my dog? And I'd much rather
Right,
go
right.
work my dog. Is
Yeah.
like like I feel like fall is way too short also. So I have to select what I want to do. Do I want to chase deer in the fall, or do I want to spend like the beginning of September and all of October and up until deer season, basically in November, chasing my dog around the woods looking for grouse and woodcock, which is what I do. And then I gun deer as quick as possibly I can to fill my freezer. And then my dog goes away because it's gun season, it's too dangerous. And then I focus on that last 2 weeks of ducks. Like it's all mapped out like every year. And it's like, I don't, short of my dog getting hurt, I just don't pick up my bow.
You know what I'm thrilled to hear about all of those hunting options? Seriously, I love hunting because it keeps people off the lake in fall, and that is the best fishing that there is.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
chasing the fall bite. Like I'm a big bass fisherman. Everybody's like, you got to get in the fall bite. Like I'm catching bass. He's like, I've got the muskie. I just caught 240 plus. I'm like, yo, man, like I'm shooting grouse in the woods. Like you have at that. I'm good.
And I am so glad that you were out there doing that.
I mean, I love fishing. Like I love fishing in the summer. I love chasing smallies. Like I'm a huge fan of chasing smallies on the Wisconsin River. Like that's really where I did quite a bit of tournament fishing last year and I really enjoyed chasing smallies on the river. So I really see myself slowing down on the tournaments this year, maybe fishing only one or two rather than fishing a full weeknight series every single week all summer and really just going back to the river and just like slowing down and just catching them river smallies because they're just so mean. I love them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mix up my archery. I do that after work. So during the week is my bow time, but Saturday and Sunday is reserved for fishing. So
And I think that also has a big thing to do with why I don't shoot anymore. I used to be able to shoot in my yard. I now
yeah.
live in a subdivision just outside of the second biggest city in Wisconsin, and my basement's 13 yards. Not even, it's 11 yards. Like I used to shoot, I'm like, this is boring. Like 11 yards, this is just like, it's not even worth it. Like it's not, I mean,
Right.
I keep the muscle memory, sure, but like I'm not actually pushing myself to be better in any sort of way. And the closest place, like the closest sportsman's club for me is over 30 minutes away. So for me to have an hour worth of driving to go shoot 40 or 50 arrows, I can't, like, it's too much. Like I can't justify the time spent for it anymore is really what it is, just because of my location.
Well, and I was gonna kind of like make fun of you a little bit, like what your neighbors don't like you like shooting across the backyards and stuff, but I mean it brings you to a bigger thought is that even before I met Josh, he was doing a little bit of bow hunting or bow fishing, I guess. Where you, in the town you were in Shawano, not to throw Shawano under the bus, but he was stopped a few different times, like you can't bow hunt in the city, and it's like no, I get it, but I'm like shooting at the lake, like in a place where nobody else is, you take the precautions and all of that, and some
That's
people
funny.
it's really hard to find a place to get out and do some of these outdoor sports.
Like, not to throw Shawano under the bus, but they're already under the bus now at this point. Like, were these local homeowners saying you can't hunt in there, or was like this actual like the police came and said?
I was discharging my bow fishing bow within 30 feet of the center line, and it's a weapon, so you can't do that. That's part of the laws. But the reason I never got a ticket was that nobody could ever explain to me whether my bow fishing rig was a bow or a harpoon. And harpoons aren't covered in natural resource law. The arrow itself, the shaft, doesn't have fletchings. It's connected to the bow itself, so it's all one unit. And north central city cops, they probably went to school there, high school there, and then they graduated and became a cop, and they just don't want to deal with it. So they're just like, hey, we keep getting calls of somebody shooting off a bridge. You can't do that. And I go, well, I can, and I'm going to. But then I just finally came up and gave up just because it wasn't even that good. And there's a lot of rocks, so I ended up busting a bunch of arrows. But
it just kind of surprised me because if you would go out on the Madison chain on a warm Saturday night, like I'll go out there in spring and troll. Like I've got a duck boat, but I'll set it up for trolling, like for walleye out there, and I'll be out there in the spring trolling, and like when the carp are like getting ready to spawn and whatnot, it's all you see is bow fishing boats on that lake at night.
Yeah.
You either have lighted planer boards, you're either trolling for walleyes, and it's a big loop that everybody basically does. Like if you're on the Madison chain, you know what I'm talking about. There's one, but all around you is nothing but spaceships.
Yep.
With bow fishing boats. So I was surprised to hear you were getting harassed up there because like they don't they shoot the crap out of these lakes.
Well, and I do have a slight advantage, being in natural resources. I have some access to information that most normal people don't, so I can look up rules and regulations a little bit more efficiently than some people. But you just have to pick your battles, and that was one that I just kind of gave up on.
I get it completely. Like, is it like there's so many different ways you can argue that? Is it even worth the argument, right? I get that.
If it was good bow fishing, I would have probably put up more of a stink, but it wasn't. So
I've always had fun doing that from my kayak. Like that's always been fun. Like you get out there with the right watercolor on a day where you have enough wind where it pushes the kayak, but not enough wind to ruin your sight. You're like the water clarity. It's great because you can just set up on a drift and you can just float right over them. They don't even care.
Yeah.
There's no sound. There's nothing. There's no trolling motor. The wind just blows you, and my kayak's stable enough I can stand to shoot the whole time, and it's like it's a good time.
Yeah, that's fun.
We keep talking that we got to get kayaks, so I'm sitting here just like listening jealously, basically. But I'm also laughing because I think even anglers so often focus on like the deep water or, where are fish or this or that drop offs. And I think they fail to realize how many fish are up shallow, how many carp are in your local waterways. Just some of these different creatures that are up there that you only see bow fishing, it's kind of like it is two different sports, but on the same water. And it's crazy that it is so different.
It's amazing what you'll see bow fishing on lakes. It is absolutely amazing. I remember going out on a well-known musky lake in Wisconsin. I'm not going to say any more specific than that. And we were talking to the guy out there, and this was before lithium was even popular. And he's out there with a really nice, it was not your typical, it wasn't a John boat. I don't remember what kind of boat it was, but I'm like, that's a unique, that's a unique boat to do bow fishing. And it was 100% quiet. He was running all lithium batteries with lights. And this was before like, LED was even out. Like he was running all HPS, before that got popular, all lithium bat. I'm like, he had lots of money because this lake was somewhat not, it wasn't real rural, and it's like generators could make people frustrated. And he's like, you wouldn't believe the walleye in this lake. I'm like, there's not walleye in this lake. What are you talking about? And he's like, you come out with me one night, I will show you walleye bigger than you can imagine in this lake. And nobody knew they were in there really, other than unless you were out there at night and he was up in the shallows and the walleyes come into the shallows to feed, and oh yeah, and that lake had really good clarity.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
So like you were saying, like it's surprising, like people guys think sometimes don't get out of their own way, like what you're saying, because I have friends that are like I'm a big bass fisherman, and I'll chase deep water fish, I'll fish ledges, I'll try to find that big bite, and they're big, and there can be big bites out there. But I'll have a friend call me fishing from her mom's pier, I just caught a 22. What? You just caught a 22-inch bass from your mom's pier, like in the sloppiest slop that I'm like, how'd you even fish that? Like, what do you even throw through there? Like I'm surprised you can't walk across that to get to clean water. It's so thick. It's just like, wow, like really? And she'll be like, yeah, oh yeah, I caught a handful over 16, this 20-incher today. I'm like, what am I doing out here? Like,
that's so cool.
Why am I chasing this fat smallie bite when I can be in there not dealing with offshore traffic from boats and just be tucked up in some shallow punching some mats?
Yeah.
That is, sure. That is true. That is true.
But again,
I also like what you said about like, don't let people get in your own way, because when we're talking about the outdoors, I think that's the other thing is people here. I mean, we're online, we're talking about what we do or don't do, but people get so caught up in that. And so it's really important to like listen to stuff like this and every other episode, or whatever else people are putting online, but only like listen halfway, I guess, like learn something from each of these things, but you have to do things your own way. And you were talking about smallies, and that's what made me think of this. We were out on Mille Lacs, I guess that's almost 2 years ago now. It was fall, and honestly, the walleyes were not biting that great, but we know that there's smallies in there. And so we tried every bass bait that we had with us. You're supposed to do this, throw like this, do this, because we're not primarily bass anglers, but we were doing what you have to do. And then we're like not catching them. We're like, screw this. And then we put on, we troll for panfish all the time. So we just started like trolling different swim baits and stuff. And I kid you not, we caught so many smallies. And part of that is just like the confidence in that technique, and so whether it's hunting, whether it's bow league, whether it's fishing, whether it's bow fishing, whatever it is, like that's one of the things is like find your niche and find your groove. And that's kind of what this is all about.
It's amazing what a confidence lure can do. Like it really is. And you just said that, like that was your confidence, like trolling, and you were able to pinpoint them fish. But it's like, it's amazing what a confidence lure will go to. It's funny because I always like, I'll bring 6 rods with for a bass tournament and everything else. And I'll bring even more when I'm out pre-fishing, trying to figure out what the bite is and the pattern is. And if I lose the pattern, there's 2 baits I'm going back to, and I know right where I'm going to throw them. It doesn't matter what I found pre-fishing anymore, because if I can't find the fish, like I know this is going to catch fish. So it's like what you said, like, why don't I just start there? Like,
yeah.
Like if this is my go-to and I know it works everywhere, why am I doing anything but that? Like I really feel like I could bring like 6 bags of plastics and 2 rods and really just like fish as good as I fish like with everything else I bring.
Yeah, but if you never tried anything new, like think of all the things you would miss out on learning. Because that's the other fun thing is like if we went out and we could like find deer every time, we could catch a fish every time, fish fry, and like I hate to say it, nobody maybe wants to say it, but sometimes those days where the bite is really hard and it's a really humbling day, you try your confidence baits and even that doesn't work. That's what makes those days so great, when you can just slam on fish or, find a trail or whatever sport that it is. I mean, because if every day was perfect, then it would be boring.
For sure. I agree 100%. And sometimes those really hard days are really like really are what pay off at the end. Because I remember, had to have been late summer last year. It was one of our weeknight tournaments in the kayak, and it was a super slow bite, like really, really slow. And I went to a spot where I thought I'd catch fish. I couldn't find them. It was really windy. It was nasty. I put all my dice into going across the lake to this spot. Like I had waves coming over the bow the whole way there. Like it was rough. It was a rough day. And like I'm like, it's not working. Like I'm sending pictures to all the rest of the paddle and fin crew. Like there's a sitting right next to me is a raccoon that came out of the reeds, and I'm texting pictures. I'm like, one of the guys' nicknames is Trash Man. I'm like, hey, wait, man, next time you crash tell your friends that not to crash my party. And like, I'm like completely out of it, right, during this tournament. And I'm like, all right, I got to focus. And I went to a bait that I had just started to try to use, and it was a jigging worm. And I pitched it in next to this tree, and I got bit like instantly, like right off a deep hole. And I'd already fished this spot once. I wound up catching 3 fish out of there, putting all 3 in the boat. That's my only 3 bites, and it was enough to take first.
Nice.
Like, so it's like I couldn't figure anything out. I couldn't focus, and like it was really frustrating. And then like I got those 3 bites. That's the only bites I had. And it's a 3 fish limit, so I got my limit in this tournament as a 3 fish rather than a 5 like most kayak tournaments. And I was able to take first that night, and it was a rough night. And I'm like, this was awesome. Like it really made, like you were saying, like sometimes that difficult period really can make it like just that much better the next time, or even in the same day once you figure it out. And even if you don't really figure it out, you're struggling all day and you get just a couple of good bites, it really makes it worth it.
Yeah, I mean that's something where I feel like, cameras on both land and water are really important. As far as I'm concerned, I think that just having the verification that you're right. You might sit in a tree all day and not see anything, and then the next day, the one you were looking for walks by at the time you would have been there, but at least he's there, right?
Right.
And so that goes same with fishing. You as long as you have a camera and you do all the things right, and you can't get anything to bite, and you like looking at your electronics, and you're like, man, maybe these are just like shiners or something, and you put it down there, and it's like that giant school of smallmouth or a big school of crappies or whatever, and like you feel vindicated, right? So at least you can go home and not feel like it was a disappointment. You learned something.
Find them.
You learned something, right? You went through all of those things that you tried didn't work, and now you just put them together with those pieces, like the weather and your cadence, and this applies to almost all the outdoor pursuit stuff. You just put all those pieces together, and then next time you can set yourself up to be successful in the way that you want to be successful.
Absolutely. I mean, every time I'm out there, I'm learning something. I mean, I'm always trying to learn. It's always what worked, what didn't work, like with grouse hunting, like time of year, weather patterns, what were they feeding on? Like if you're able to harvest a bird, looking at the crop, like what are they feeding on? What time of day are you finding them? And what kind of cover are you finding them in that time of day? Is it really hot? Are they lowland? Are they wet? Are they in swamps? Is it kind of cool? Or I mean, all of that. And every time I go out, I'm always like, okay, what did I do different here? Like what was different? What worked? What didn't work? Same with fishing. So I think that's a big part of it for me, is the constant learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, one kind of last thing that we do as far as our fishing and some of the hunting goes, like we've devoted a whole room in our house to tackle craft, building rods, like MacGyvering stuff to make our escapades out in the wilderness like a little bit more fun. And it's learning how those things interact in the water, and learning how like certain things work. I take a lot of inspiration from the bass world. Japan's been doing it for a long time, and they've been microsizing stuff, and I just really love taking the challenge of taking like an Alabama rig and turning it into like a crappie rig, even a bluegill rig.
Sure.
A swarm of little bugs on there, who knows? Because those kind of things like keep you engaged, and you might find that golden thing that like
your new favorite lure.
Yeah.
Your new confidence.
Right. Well, someone came up with a vibrating jig, right? That wasn't around 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was a spinner bait or a buzz bait. And all of a sudden, what's this vibrating jig? Like someone came up with that. Someone decided to put a flat blade in front of a jig one day and was like, holy crap, this is amazing.
Yep. Yep.
Or like before, like with musky baits, before they had those really giant bucktails and synthetics, like with the big Carolina blades, back then I was bit by the musky bug and we were making our own lures. Like we were making huge Carolina blades on 5-inch vices and hammering them out with hammers, like to the point where we were blowing up like the old school Abu Garcia 6300s, like at least a couple of season. But these fish had never seen a lure put out this much vibration.
Yeah.
And the amount of follows we got, because they were just like, I don't even know what this is. I'm going to investigate, was like, you knew you were on the right path. And now you've got like the showgirls and the cowgirls and the doubles and the, like, it's like the market caught up, but for a while there, nobody knew what we were doing. Like we were throwing like big, like that's back when like the Mepps Muskie Killer was a big bucktail, and we're making things 3 to 4 times that size.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like when the Bulldog came out for muskies, like giant plastics, and they're hammering fish because they've never seen it before.
Right.
I'm laughing a little bit because I'm trying to not like get into a huge story while we're like kind of summing things up. But when we just recently moved in August, and we ended up. So if you've heard of the Suick Lure Company, we ended up in the Suick house. So like, welcome. But we found like a few little Easter eggs and things around the house that have to do, with kind of the history of the company. And so Josh actually went online and found like one of the oldest versions of a Suick lure. And we also in this process had picked up a very new version of a Suick lure because it happens to be on their website. It's signed by all the family members. So as far as the history of the house, it was really cool. But to be able to have like this very old original version and like this brand new version. And I mean, that is really cool, but the technology difference, I mean, it's hard to call a lure technology, but that is what it is, and to see that evolution along the way. I mean, and you were talking about the tackle crafting even. I mean, that's the thing. Anybody can come up with the next big idea, and so
right.
Like we were saying, going out there and trying something new, you never know what's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the cool part. Like, it doesn't even take much. Like, we'll pick on the vibrating jig because it was easy, right? Someone put a flat blade in front of a bass jig.
Yeah.
Changed the complete style of the lure. Like, someone decided to do that one day, and it was probably some random person, to be honest, and it worked, right?
Oh.
I mean, I don't even know what the next big idea is. I don't know. I haven't thought of it yet. I might not be the one to even think of it. Someone's going to be like, look at the Alabama rig. Like,
yeah.
Like someone thought of throwing a whole bunch of shiny, flashy stuff with a whole bunch of hooks and baits on it. Like, let's make it look like a swarm of shad. Like, or what is that? That deep jigging technique they came out for ocean now, for ocean fishing. They've got they've got a whole different style, slow jigging.
Yep.
Like that's like its own unique thing too. Like someone came out like with that and the presentation and the baits for that, or giant swim baits now. Like it's all like, there's all these new things coming out. It's cool. It's like you said, anybody can get into that too and just try those unique things and see what works.
Yeah, and people shouldn't be scared to cross over into different categories. I take a lot of stuff from my hunting background and bring it into fishing and vice versa. We were talking about reading maps, and that's one thing that like animals just follow the same thing. The path of least resistance. Animals are like water. And sometimes, you get a weird one that like runs straight up a hill or, whatever, but you take all of that knowledge and you can like put it together and just really mash up all of your experience from all facets of the multiple industries and really make yourself successful.
That is the good part. That's the fun part about it. I mean, it's just all that was learning, just taking knowledge from everywhere you can. And like you said, take it with a grain of salt, but take that knowledge and find a way to make it work for you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give you two the last few minutes of the show here, talk about what you all do. Shout out Crappie Junction and everything else you got going on. Thank whoever you need to thank. And
let's start by thanking your viewers at home, right?
Yeah.
Because Without them, none of us would be here. And if you'd like to continue to join us on the things that we do and talk about and all of that, we love to share out mostly the fishing world, but we do some of this other stuff, and we like to share that too. But Crappie Junction, we are on most of your favorite social media platforms, and crappies are indeed our favorite, but we are multi-species angler and fish all kinds of different locations. We like to travel here and there and all those kinds of things. So different adventures, including expos. So especially this weekend, we have coming up the Wisconsin Fishing Expo down in Madison. So if you are in that area, definitely look that up this weekend. Lots of fabulous things going on. But we like to do live videos with different vendors and stuff to bring the show and the expo to the people who can't be there. So you see a lot of that from us. But I guess for that show specifically, if you can make it, they do prizes as well. So just for showing up, you are eligible to win. And so, just sharing all that kind of stuff that we experience with everyone else. That's what we do.
Yep.
I love it. And the Wisconsin Fishing Expo is a great show. Like you said, they've got prize patrol that goes around. I will be there in the Rocktown booth representing New Canoe. So if you are in the area and want to meet me in person, stop by the Rocktown booth. You'll see these two walking around if you're there at the right time. So I hope to see some people out. I think it's one of my favorite shows. I really do enjoy that show.
Yeah, it's very fun. The advertising company does a really wonderful job. And we love working with them. And, kind of our thing is just weeding through the information, weeding through the products, and just kind of recommending what works for us while also giving you an idea of what else is out there. And so don't just take our advice and get everything that we get, because a lot of times it might not work for you. And so that's kind of what we base ourselves on, is getting the information out there and helping people.
Trying to be impartial but partial at the same time. Like, this works for us, but theirs is out here as well. Like, feel free to use it.
Yep.
I like it. And I will link, and I'll provide all their links in the show descriptions to all their different social media platforms and anything else they have going on. So you'll be very easy to find them. I'll tag them in the show like always. Emily and Josh, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a fun show.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah.
I learned quite a bit about maple syrup, which was very surprising. I liked it.
There's a lot more to learn.
Oh, I'm sure there is. To all my listeners, thanks again for tuning in. I wouldn't do this without you. And until next time, everyone, keep chasing the experience.